This will make power ports appear on the gadgets in the scene. Stretch the wire over to the destroyer and connect it to the power port with R2 or X. Great! Time to test it again with R3 and see what happens. When the block's health runs out, it will get destroyed, leaving the path clear for Connie. But how do we know how much health the block has left? We could always look at its tweak menu, but you can't see that in play mode. So click L3 to rewind time, and I'll show you how to display health in the next step. If the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open already, open it now with L1 and square. When you hover over the menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget, but there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her health manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing, so let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it, using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the modifier's tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try in play mode. All right, that should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot today, so take her through the door to end this tutorial. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the Grid Snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the Assembly menu and open the Guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that Grid Snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that. So let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the connectors section in the assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared. 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles appeared. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared. 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial.
Hello, I'm Kareem, Art Director of Media Molecule. Today I will be doing a sculpture masterclass. I'll be modeling a male bust and going through basic modeling techniques to block the general form of the sculpture and build up to more detailed techniques and more sculptural philosophies and attitudes to find your own personal style in Dream. I hope you find it inspiring for you to start sculpting and find your own style in Dreams. And now we begin sculpting our head. The first phase is to block out the general shape of all the head and bust components. Here we go. This is a sculpture pedestal that I've made earlier for the purpose of this tutorial. Also, I've made the space around us and put in it some of my favorite sculptures for inspiration and reference. I've also pre-lit it with nice lights to help us sculpt in a nice atmosphere. Before we start the sculpture, I would like to recap that it's very important to have learned the camera controls. In the Dream tutorials, you will find tutorials just focusing on the camera controls and tells you all about the different nuances of it. The most important one is the grab cam. where pressing your move button on your primary controller will grab the point in space that your imp tip is over. This is the imp tip on top of the imp here. So if I put my imp wherever I want to go, press the move button, pull myself towards that point, or push myself away, you see that the camera is moving accordingly. It's very important to have practiced this in order to proceed with the sculpt tutorial. There is also other features in the camera, like zooming, which makes you zoom in right close to an area in order to work on very fine detail. I would recommend that you practice using the camera controls now, and when you feel confident in them, click the arrow on the video to go to the next step.
Connie's hosting a talent contest to find the best characters in the Dreamiverse. But she's a no-nonsense judge, and none of these candidates are up to scratch. Of course, Cuthbert's no use, so let's see if we can come up with something to impress her. Head into the dressing room, also known as edit mode, to get started. In this tutorial, we'll be customizing the appearance of a puppet. So we'll need a blank canvas to start. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Gadgets menu. Now open the Gameplay Gear menu. In here, find the Blank Puppet Deluxe. The Deluxe version is the perfect starting point for making characters. Select it with X and a blue mannequin will appear on your imp. It has built-in features like jump and possession animations, which the basic version doesn't have. Connie won't be impressed by a basic puppet, so make sure you select the right one. Stamp the deluxe puppet in the scene with R2 or X. Get its feet roughly on the floor, but make sure they aren't intersecting with it. Then press the circle button to unequip the puppet from your imp. If you need to, you can grab and adjust the puppet with R2. In the next step, we'll start exploring the puppet's inner workings. The puppet might look simple, but it's quite a complex gadget. So let's get to know it a little better. It's made up of many objects that have been grouped together. And just like any other group, it can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. If they're obscured by the floor, you may need to scope out and adjust your puppet's position. The puppet's body is made of sculptures, joined together with connectors. When scoped in, we can grab parts of the puppet to change its pose. Before we do that, find the button called Puppet Mirror in the context menu. Select this button with X, and your puppet will stay symmetrical when you pose it. Of course, you don't have to make it symmetrical, but it's a good way to start. You can always add nuance later. When you move a part of the puppet, all the parts connected to it will also move. The root of the puppet is the pelvis, and every other part is connected in a hierarchy from there. For example, moving the upper arm will move the lower arm and the hand as well. But if you move the pelvis, the whole puppet will move. Its feet will try to stay in contact with the floor. So if you lower the pelvis, the puppet's knees will bend. You can also rotate parts by grabbing them with L2. Use R2 and L2 to create a new pose for the puppet. Changing the pose can be a great starting point for a character. The pose could be confident, sad, scared, or aggressive. Don't forget, you can undo any changes with the left directional button if you make a mistake. Use the grab cam to adjust your pose from different angles. Just hold R1 over the puppet to activate it. When you've finished posing your puppet, move on to the next step. Now we've posed our puppet, we can start adjusting its proportions. To do that, we're going to use the stretch tool. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The stretch tool works like the move tool in a lot of ways. But with the stretch tool, you can move parts of the puppet beyond the limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Notice the way the neck elongates and shortens. Now try it on the hands. This changes the length of the upper and lower arm. Some body parts respond differently to the stretch tool. For instance, if you move the upper arms, the shoulders will broaden and the chest will expand. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons. I'd only recommend doing this to the puppet's extremities though, the head, hands and feet. Puppets are delicate contraptions, and extreme scaling and stretching can make them behave unexpectedly. But if anything does go skew, just undo it using the left directional button. If you know how to use sculpt mode, you could try scoping into the individual body parts to change their shape. You can find a whole tutorial on sculpting in the art tutorials. Have a play around with stretching and scaling and see what you can create. Try making the puppet more cartoony or turn it into a monster. Test out your puppet in play mode to see it in motion. When you're done, return to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. In the next step, I'll show you how to color and stylize your puppet. Another way of customizing your puppet's appearance is by changing its color. We can do this by tinting it in coat mode. If you've played my tutorial on coat, style and effects, you'll already know how to do this. In the Assembly menu, go to the Modes menu and enter Coat Mode. In the Coat Mode menu, open the Colors menu and select a color for your puppet. Now hover over your puppet and hold R2 to tint it with your selected color. The longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint will become. If you want your puppet to be multicolored, simply scope into the puppet. Select a different color from the Colors menu. Hover your imp over a part of the puppet you want to tint. How about the head? Now, when you press and hold R2, just that part of the puppet will be tinted. You can also use the tools in Style Mode and Effects Mode. Try using Style Mode to change the texture of your puppet. If you don't know how to use Style Mode, there's an art tutorial which can help you. In the next step, we'll dive into the Dressing Up box. One of the simplest ways to customize a puppet is by adding accessories. But to make sure they move with the puppet, we need to group them with a body part. Before we do that, it's important to fully understand the concept of scoping in and out of groups and objects. If you've played part 4 of the Start Dreaming tutorials, then you'll already know a thing or two about using groups. Objects in dreams are often combined into groups, which can be treated like a single object in assembly mode. Groups themselves can also be grouped. This means that you can have groups nested inside other groups. Let's try scoping in and out of something else before we invade the puppet's personal space. Over there on the floor is a hat box. Make sure you're in edit mode. Now try taking the lid off the hat box. The whole box will move because the lid, the box, and its contents have been grouped. Undo the move with the left directional button to put it back in its place. Now scope into the group. Hover over the hat box, press and hold L1 and press X. Everything but the box should go grey and blurry. If not, make sure your visual feedback preference is set to all. This shows that you've scoped into the group and can edit its contents. Now, you should be able to take the lid off the hat box. Inside is another hat box. Try taking the lid off this one. I think you can guess what will happen. This smaller hat box is also grouped with its lid and contents. Remove the smaller box and place it next to the large one. Now scope into this group by holding L1 and pressing X over the smaller hat box. The original hat box will go grey and blurry as we've scoped into a subgroup. Now you should be able to open the smaller hat box. What's inside? A lovely hat! Take it out and place it next to the smaller box. When you've done that, proceed to the next step. Now that we've taken the hat out of the box, let's try putting it on our puppet. First, we need to scope out of this group. To do that, simply hold L1 and press circle. That takes us back into the large hatbox group. Now scope out again into the main scene by holding L1 and pressing circle. Pick up the hat. We seem to have a bit of a problem here. The hat is still inside the nested groups, even though it's outside the hatbox. When you scope in and out, only you and your imp are moving in and out of objects or groups. Unless you're carrying something with you. Scope back into the large hatbox group, and then into the smaller hatbox group to get the hat. Now grab and hold the hat with R2, and scope out of both groups with L1 and circle while holding the hat. If you've done it correctly, you should be back in the main scene. With a hat you can now move independently of the boxes. That's because scoping in and out of a group whilst holding an object adds or removes it from that group. Hurrah! Now we can put it on the puppet. Grab the hat, hover over the puppet, then hold L1 and press X to scope into the puppet with the hat. Now scope into the puppet's head while still holding the hat. This is a shortcut for grouping two objects if you're already grabbing one of them. Simply grab an object and scope into another object to group them automatically without having to select them. The same way that scoping into a group while holding an object adds it to the group. Now that it's in a group with the head, place the hat where you want it. Remember to check it from different angles using the grab cam to make sure it's in position. Press R2 softly to nudge if you need to make fine adjustments to the position of the hat. Before you move on, you should try out the puppet to see it walk around with its new accessory. Switch to play mode, possess it with R2, and take it for a wander. Nice. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Going to play mode and back to edit mode will scope you out of any groups. Remember to rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. Then go to the next step. Okay, let's add some more accessories before our puppet's stage debut. Open the assembly menu and select Search, the button with the magnifying glass, to search for an element. Usually, you'd be in the Dreamiverse here, but for this tutorial, I've kept things simple and curated a collection of elements for you to use. Take a look at some of the accessories in the collection. Select one you like with X. You'll now have your chosen accessory on your imp. Don't stamp it down yet though. First we need to scope into the puppet. You can do this even when you have an element from the Dreamiverse on your imp. Scope in with L1 and X, and then scope into the body part that you want to attach it to. If that body part is already in its own group, you'll enter that group. But if the body part is just a sculpture, then you'll create a new group when you stamp the object down. Once the accessory is in the group, you can adjust the accessory while you're there. Try adding some more accessories from the collection. Then it's important to test the puppet in play mode to check that the accessory is attached correctly. Here's another very important tip. If you ever want to remove an accessory, whatever you do, don't ungroup the body part. If you do that, you'll delete that group's connection to the puppet. And without the connector, your puppet's limbs will start falling off when you go into play mode. And nobody wants that. Instead, scope into the group containing the body part and the accessory. Then either delete the accessory or grab it and scope out. If there's only one object left in the group, it'll automatically ungroup, and the connector will remain safely connected to the remaining object. Play around with the things you've learned in this tutorial and have fun making a character. When you're happy, select the star podium from the tutorial collection and stamp it down in the outline that we've put in the scene for you. Then head back into play mode, jump onto the podium and see what Connie thinks of your creation. When you're happy, select the star podium from the tutorial collection and stamp it down in the outline that we've put in the scene for you. Then head back into play mode, jump onto the podium and see what Connie thinks of your creation. Oh dear, it looks like Cuthbert is really stuck this time. In previous tutorials, you've edited the scene to help Connie reach Cuthbert. But this time, you'll be editing Connie herself, supercharging her with some new abilities to to get past the obstacles in the scene. Bear in mind that this is a complex tutorial in which it's easy to make a mistake. If you do, remember to use the left directional button to undo. Now go into play mode and see how far you can get. Possess Connie with R2 and press the X button to jump. Oops, she can't even get over the first obstacle. So let's start by souping up her jump height. Switch back to edit mode and we'll get started. To change Connie's jump height, all we need to do is tweak her. So hover over her, hold L1 and press the square button to open her tweak menu. This is a puppet tweak menu. As you can see, it's jam-packed with different options. Thankfully, the setting we want is on the first page. All these settings control Connie's overall movement. We could make Connie run super fast or super slow, but nah, that's not gonna help her. A nice high jump is what we need. What do we have here? This slider controls Connie's jump height. Hover over it with your imp and hold X to grab it. Move your imp to adjust the slider to around 3 meters. That should be enough to get over that stack of blocks. The Puppet Tweak menu also has some really useful testing controls. Click R3 to start time, and Connie will come to life. See what happens now if you hover your imp over the jump height slider. You can preview the jump, so you can get it to the perfect height without having to test it in play mode. Actually, I think you should dial it back to 2.5 meters, or she might overshoot the jump. You can make small adjustments to sliders by using the up and down directional buttons. Hover over the slider and use the down directional button to adjust the setting. Feel free to explore some of the other settings in the menu. If you're not sure what a button or slider does, just hover over it for a few seconds and a more info tip will pop up to explain. You can even adjust the strength of gravity on her jump. Turn it down a bit to make her jump more floaty. When you've got Connie's jump the way you want it, give it a test run in play mode. See how far Connie can get now, then move on to the next step when you're ready to continue. Well, that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, Connie's new jumping skills aren't going to be much use on the next obstacle. And don't even think about making her jump over the top, because that force field will zap her in a second. Instead, let's give Connie the power to crouch. I bet she's always dreamed of it. If you're still in play mode, switch back to edit mode now. Rewind time with L3 to put Connie back at the start. To give her a crouch, we need to scope into her. Puppets are made up of sculptures, connectors, and gadgets that are grouped together. Hover over Connie, press and hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you've scoped into a puppet, you can see its inner workings. On Connie's back, there's a microchip gadget. It's called Connie's brain, and it contains all her logic and animations. Let's take a look inside. Hold L1 and press X over it to scope in and open the microchip canvas. There's quite a lot going on in here. The gadget I want you to look at is this one in the bottom right corner with the diamond icon. This is a keyframe gadget. If you've played through the keyframes and timelines tutorial, you'll already know all about these. Keyframes record changes to things in the scene. They store those changes in a gadget, which can be triggered using logic. This keyframe contains a crouching pose for Connie. Select the keyframe with X and you'll see a preview of how it looks. Those dashed lines over Connie show that she's being changed by the keyframe. Press circle to deselect the keyframe and she goes back to normal. To be able to activate the crouch keyframe, we need to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. Then you'll be able to make her crouch with a controller button. In the next step, I'll show you how to do exactly that. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu stay to the left. This is because they generate signals, and signals flow through gadgets from left to right in Dreams. You can also save the 3D space position of tweak menus and microchips, or pin them to the screen, using the buttons that appear at the top when hovering over the canvas.
Looks cool.
This will help you keep them tidy while you're editing logic, which is very important as it's easy to make mistakes. Now, let's take a closer look at that controller sensor. Ah, look, controller buttons. Just what we need. All playable characters contain a controller sensor gadget like this one. But the gadget can also be used for any situation where you want to detect button presses. To assign our keyframe to a button, we just need to wire it to the controller sensor. We won't use a circle button as that depossesses Connie, and X makes her jump. So how about the square button to crouch? Make sure you can see the keyframe on the microchip. Move the tweak menu with R2 if you need to. If you hover over the square button in the controller sensor menu, you'll see ports appear on either side of it. They're just like the ports you see on gadgets. Ports on the left are inputs, and ports on the right are outputs. Now, you need to be very precise for the next part, as it's easy to make a mistake. Carefully hover your imp over the output port of the square button, and press X to create a wire. Stretch that wire over to the keyframe and connect it to the power port on the bottom of the gadget with X. If at any time you make a mistake, just undo it using the left directional button. Once your crouch move is all wired up, close the controller sensor tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1, then press circle to close. Now try out Connie's new crouch in play mode. See if she can make it under the second obstacle. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and start the next step. Right, we're on to the final obstacle. There's no way around it, but it looks destructible. So we're going to make a slam attack for Connie so that she can smash through it. We'll start by recording a pose for the slam. We can do this using a keyframe. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my keyframes and timelines tutorial, you'll have a bit of a head start on this next part. Go to the assembly menu and open the animate menu. Select the keyframe with X. You'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and colour. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Because we're scoped in, this opens the tweak menu for the sculpture itself, rather than the puppet. All the settings on this page change the way Connie's cone looks. Look for the glow slider on the first page. Its icon is a sun. Raise the glow up to about 40%. Once you've set the glow, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview what's been recorded. Looks good. Deselect the keyframe by pressing circle. In the next step, we'll continue building Connie's slam attack.
Kinda hard.
The next step is to place our new Connie animation into a timeline. Using a timeline will let us time the animations and effects of the slam attack. Go to the Assembly menu and back to the Animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp a timeline above the crouch keyframe. Now let's open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas with X. Move your imp to shorten the timeline to 1 second. Make sure you don't select the trim button by mistake. It's a square button by the numbers at the top of the timeline. It has a black arrow on it. The timeline duration is now correct, but the space is very small. So let's zoom in a bit. Hover your imp over the timeline canvas, hold L1 and press the right directional button to zoom in. This will keep the timeline duration to 1 second long, but stretch the space so that you can fit more detail into it. If you need to zoom out, just hold L1 and press the left directional button. Now let's put our slam attack keyframe onto the timeline. Grab the keyframe with R2 and place it at the start of the timeline canvas. Make sure you've got the slam keyframe and not the crouch one. The gadget automatically snaps to the surface of the canvas. The keyframe is only a fraction of a second long at the moment, but we need it to fill the length of the timeline. So hover over the keyframe and hold the up directional button to scale it. Make it the same length as the timeline. Now we want to wire the timeline up to a button press, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the out tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's slam attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add some force to it. When you're ready to continue, return to edit mode, rewind time, and start the next step. The slam attack animation is all set up, but it's not doing much besides looking cool, so we need to add a gadget to our timeline that will emit a force when Connie slams the ground. The gadget we're going to use for this is the force applier. Go to the assembly menu and open the gadgets menu. Find the move as an output menu and open it with X. The icon for the force applier looks like a gust of wind. Select it with X to equip it to your imp. I hope you've still got the timeline open. If not, open it with L1 and X. Stamp the force applier onto the timeline canvas below the keyframe. Press circle to unequip the force applier from your imp. The force applier isn't very strong by default, so we'll need to tweak it. To open its tweak menu, hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square. At the top of the tweak menu is the force strength slider. Its icon is a beefy arm. Drag it all the way up to 100% using your imp. That will ensure the force emitted will overcome the gravity in the scene and the friction between the blocks. Next, increase the force speed to 10 meters per second. That will give the slam attack some punch. If you take a look at Connie, you'll see a green zone around her. Anything in this zone will be affected by the force applier. At the moment, the zone isn't much bigger than Connie. Hover your imp over the zone and arrow gizmos will appear. Grab them with R2 and move your imp to change the size of the zone. Or you can scale the zone more precisely in the force applier tweak menu. Go to the tab called Zone Size. Grab the zone size slider with X and set it to about 3.5 meters. Okay, let's test out Connie's new powers. Switch over to play mode. Possess Connie and give her new slam attack a try. Oops! Looks like it's more power
Hello
than Connie
there.
can handle. The force applier is pushing her off the platform. Switch back to edit mode and rewind in time. In the final step, I'll show you how to tweak the force applier so that it only affects the objects we want it to.
Wish I could play this right now.
To prevent the force applier from pushing Connie off the platforms, we're going to use labels. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip. Open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. Now tweak the force applier with L1 and square. Labels can be given to any object in the scene, and gadgets like the force applier can detect them. In the force applier tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. Hover over the friend button and press X to deselect it. It's the button with the heart icon. Now Connie should be able to blast through the blocks without firing herself off into space. Use her new skills to pass all the obstacles. And you can use your new skills to create some characters for your scenes. When you've successfully rescued Cuthbert, go through the door to finish this tutorial. When things don't sound the way they should, it can ruin the experience of playing. Don't worry, Cuthbert. The Dreamiverse contains heaps of ready-made sounds for us to use. First, let's switch over to play mode and see how it all sounds at the moment. Quiet, isn't it? Doesn't feel quite right. In fact, it's creeping me out, so let's head back into edit mode. Switch over to sound mode so we can start adding some sounds. Find the modes menu. It's inside the assembly menu. As you can see, there are lots of different modes. Each has its own set of tools for doing different things. We're currently in assembly mode. If you select the speaker symbol icon with X, we'll switch to sound mode. That's better. In the next step, we'll start adding sounds to the scene.
Would be super good in VR.
Okay, the first thing we need to do is to start adding some background sounds. See the button with the magnifying glass in the sound menu? That's the search menu. Select it now to view the different types of sounds you can add. Now select the speaker button to search for sound effects. This is the Dreamiverse. where you can find all the wonderful stuff other dreamers have made. I've already set aside a collection of sound effects for you in here. That's what this collection is. It's bursting with different sound effects for you to play with. Select it with X to open it. I've arranged the sound effects into groups for you. To get a proper overview, use the right stick to zoom in and out of the collection. This group of sound effects are background sounds. You can hear a preview of each sound by hovering over them with your imp. Find something that fits the dreamy atmosphere of the scene. I rather like dream space. When you've found a sound you like, select it with X. The sound you selected now appears as a gadget on your imp. You can stamp it into your scene with R2, any place you like. It doesn't matter where you put it because background sounds can be heard everywhere in a scene. Now let's start time with R3 and see how it all sounds. Ah, that's better. Notice how much more alive the scene feels with just that one sound. Imagine how it will feel with even more sound effects. But there's no need to imagine it. You can start adding more now to create a layered and unique ambience. If you want to replace a sound effect, just stamp a different one over it. When you've got things sounding just how you want them, rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. Background sounds really help to create an immersive atmosphere. But to add sound to a specific object in the scene, you need to use what we call a spot sound. Let's try it out on the fire between the platforms. I'm sure we can find some fire sound effects in the collection. Let's take a look. Select Search Sound Effects from the Sound menu. As we open the tutorial collection in the last step, it's still open when we come back to the Dreamiverse. Isn't that handy? Ah, just what we need, some fire sound effects. Have a listen to some of the fire sounds and pick one you like. Once you've selected it, your imp will be equipped with a spot sound effect. See those rings coming off the gadget? That's the sound's fade zone. The rings show you how the sound fades away as you move further from the source. Let's stamp that sound between the first two platforms. Put it above the fire and see what that sounds like. If you want to see the sound's fade zone, select the gadget with X. Click R3 to listen to the sound effect. You'll notice the sound gets louder the closer you get to it. Aha! You can almost feel that fire. Toasty. As you move away, out of the fade zone, it gets quieter, until eventually you can't hear it at all. You can press the circle button now to deselect the sound effect. Then click L3 to rewind the scene. If you're happy with your spot sound, move on to the next step. Things haven't been that tricky for Connie so far, but the next gap looks a bit too big, even with her mighty jumping skills. Let's fly over to that floating platform using the left and right sticks and get a closer look at it. Looks like there's a trigger zone attached to it. Why don't we switch over to play mode and see what it does? Well, will you look at that? It lights up the platform when Connie steps on it. Lovely. You know what would make it even better, though? If it made a sound as well. So let's switch back to edit mode and make that happen. I've got a feeling you can find something in the tutorial collection to use here. Go to the assembly menu and go back into sound mode. Now go to search and select search sound effects. Over here are some energy sound effects. Have a listen to a few. Pick a sound effect for your light-up platform. I quite like the sound of Dream Terminal. See which one you like and select it with X. Now it's time to stamp it in the scene somewhere near the platform. In the next step, I'll show you how to trigger the sound effect. As we've already seen, background and spot sounds will play constantly when placed in the scene like this. But for the platform, we want the sound to be triggered by Connie. And for that to happen, we need to connect the sound effect to the same trigger zone that activates the glow. Move in closer to the platform using the left and right sticks. Take a good look at the trigger zone gadget. Do you see the output port that says detected when you hover over it? That means it will trigger when it detects a possessed puppet like Connie. So all we need to do to make the sound effect activate when Connie's on the platform is connect the output to the sound effect. Let's do that now. When you select the detected port with R2 or X, you'll see your imp becomes tethered to the port by a wire. Gadgets communicate with each other using wires like this. You'll also notice that a power port has appeared on the bottom of the sound effect gadget. To connect the two gadgets, just hover over that power port and press R2 or X. Time to head into play mode to see how it sounds. When you're ready, switch back to edit mode and start the next step. Oh, I just realized something. We got so caught up with these sound effects, we forgot to add another platform for Connie. She must be getting impatient. Sort that out for her. The easiest thing to do would be to clone the platform. Remember how to do that? Just hover over it, hold L1, and press and hold R2. Once the clone has been created, let go of L1, move it to the right spot, then release R2 to place it down. When you clone an object, any gadgets attached to it will come along for the ride. So all you need to do now is to wire the trigger zone on the second platform to the sound effect. Or even better, grab a new sound effect from the collection, just for variety. It's up to you. Dream shapers should always go with their instincts. Whatever you choose to do, move on to the next step when you're ready. All right, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross before she reaches the door. That pink cylinder would make a great stepping stone for her, but it's all the way down in the water. If you take a closer look at it, you'll see there's a trigger zone and a movement sensor on it. They're not connected to anything right now. There's also a keyframe on the platform. I wonder what that does. Try selecting it with X to find out. Just as I thought. It raises the cylinder, so Connie can use it to cross over. Press the circle button to deselect the keyframe. Looks like all we need to do is connect the cylinder's trigger zone to the keyframe, so it moves up when she gets close. And while we're doing that, why not add a sound effect to it as well? Let's jump back into the sound effects collection and see if there's anything appropriate in there. Down here we've got some mechanical sound effect loops. These are the perfect sound effects for any sort of machinery in a scene. We want something that would go well with a raising platform. I think I'll go for the heavy metal ratchet loop. That sounds good, right? Okay, now select the sound effect of your choice and stamp it near the pink cylinder with R2 or X. In the next step, I'll show you how to connect all of the gadgets. Now we just need to do a little bit of wiring to get everything working. Remember, the trigger zone will activate when it detects Connie, triggering the keyframe to raise the platform. Grab the detected output from the trigger zone with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire to the keyframe gadget and connect it to its power port with R2 or X. Now let's get the sound effect working. This will be triggered by the movement sensor. The movement sensor detects when the object it's attached to is moving. So when the platform starts rising, the movement sensor will send a signal from its output port. That's the output port on the right side of the movement sensor gadget. It's called velocity overall. Press R2 or X over the port to create a wire. You'll need to connect the other end of the wire to the sound effects power port. Once that's done, switch over to play mode to test everything out. So much better. That sound effect really makes a big difference. There's even more you can do to bring this scene to life. See if you can add some sound to the water between the platforms. I think there might be some water sounds in the tutorial collection. Experiment with the different effects as much as you like and see what you can come up with. When you're done, just take Connie through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial. This tutorial is all about making music. Music can make your creations come alive, adding emotion and atmosphere. In dreams, you can compose whole tracks from scratch and even make your own instruments. But you don't need to be a maestro to start making your own music. I'll show you how to create an arrangement using ready-made music clips. So let's begin. To start making music, we need to switch over to sound mode. Right now, you're in assembly mode. If you're ever unsure of what mode you're in, just hover over the icon in the top left corner to see your current mode and tool. Go to the assembly menu and open the modes menu with X. The Modes menu is where you access all the different creation modes. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The button for Sound mode has a speaker symbol on it. Select it with X. Now you have a new menu at the top of the screen. This is the Sound menu. It contains everything you need to make your own music. In the scene, you'll see a timeline gadget. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit it. Music in Dreams is arranged in timelines. This timeline contains a version of the music you heard at the start of this tutorial. To see what's inside it, we need to open its canvas. Hover your imp over the timeline, hold L1 and press X to open it. It's just like scoping into a group. This is the timeline canvas. The canvas exists within scene space, so if you pull down on the left stick, you'll back away from it. Hold the L1 button and use the left stick to move up and down the timeline. This is the best way to navigate around timelines, especially when they're big. This piece of music is called Connie's theme. To listen to it, just start time by clicking R3. See how the piece is composed of many music clips. The clips power on and off as the playhead passes over them. Click R3 again to pause time. Each music clip is a collection of notes made by an instrument. You can grab them and move them around with your imp. If you want to delete a music clip, hover over it and press the triangle button. Clips can also be cloned by holding L1 when you grab them. You can extend the timeline by hovering over one of its edges and holding X. The edge glows and an arrow icon appears. You can also extend the bottom if you need space for more clips. Once you've finished listening to the piece, click L3 to rewind time. You can find all sorts of different music by searching the Dreamiverse. To add music to one of your scenes, you could simply stamp a ready-made timeline, like this one. But in this tutorial, you'll learn how to assemble your own track from ready-made music clips. Move on to the next step and we'll get started. So, let's start making music. It's actually a lot easier than you might think. Close the timeline by selecting the cross button in the top right corner. Or hover over it, hold L1 and press circle to close it. Now delete the timeline by hovering over it with your imp and pressing triangle. Let's add a new music timeline to the scene. Press square to open the sound menu. Select the music timeline button in the menu, then stamp one in the scene with R2 or X. Press circle to unequip the timeline gadget from your imp. Open up the timeline canvas with L1 and X. This timeline is empty, ready to be filled with music. The columns on the timeline represent musical bars. This timeline is 8 bars long. We'll need more space than that, so hover over the right edge and grab it with X. Extend the timeline to 16 bars. Now let's add a music clip to the timeline. Press square to open the sound menu. find the search button and select it with X. Its icon is the magnifying glass. When you search in sound mode, there are 4 options for finding different sounds. Select Search Music Clips with X. This is the Dreamiverse. Here you can find music made by other dream shapers. Well, usually you can, but for this tutorial, I've made a collection of elements for you to use. That's what this cluster is. Select it with X to open it. It contains a selection of music clips which you can use to build your own arrangements. Use the right stick to zoom in and out and the left stick to move around. I've grouped the clips into different categories. Let's start with a basic melody. That's this group of clips. Hover over the clips to hear a preview of how they sound. Find one that you like, then select it with X to equip it to your imp. I'm using the clip Nostalgia Bells. Your imp will now be holding a gadget containing your selected clip. If you hover over the timeline, the gadget should snap to the canvas and reveal the whole clip. Place the clip at the start of the timeline and stamp it with R2 or X. Clips on a timeline will snap to the bars and to other clips. This will help you line them up. Click R3 to listen to the timeline. In the next step, we'll build up the track with some more clips. Click L3 to rewind time. Let's build on the melody by adding some chords. Go to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips again. Over here are some chord clips. Hover over the clips to preview them, then select one with X. I'm going with Suspended Pad, but you can make your own choice. Stamp your clip onto a new row of the timeline and snap it to the start. Click R3 to listen and notice how the clips play together in time. Click L3 to rewind. Now let's add some drums. Go back to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips. Find the drum clips in the collection. A drum beat can really change the feel of a track. I love these samba practice drums. Pick a drum clip you like, then stamp it onto the timeline under the melody and chords. Now click R3 to listen to how it sounds. All the clips in the collection are in the same time and key, so you can mix and match them easily. Click L3 to rewind. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit the length of your clips and how to add fades. When you hover over a clip on the timeline, you'll see dotted lines light up at the start and at the end of the clip. Move closer to the timeline so you can see them properly. These are trim.